Hello, and welcome to episode 23 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. We are here today with Dr. Alan Cheung, former president of the Montgomery County Board of Education. How are you doing today, Dr. Cheung?
Fine, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, what are you currently doing, or what have you ever done in your life to advance the public interest, and why?
Well, I'm now what I call professional volunteer. Getting involved in trying to improve in terms of the community, services, education, welfare, and overall. And I have retired since 2002. And when you retire, you think about what is the future. And the greatest benefits I can offer is to help the community. And you can call it public service, I can call it, humanism, because we are social beings.
Yeah.
And we cannot survive by ourselves. And if I am the only one do well, if my neighbor does not do well,
Right.
doesn't help me, how long can I be doing well? So therefore, you have to get the whole community.
So talk to me a little bit what you've been doing with the community. Particularly, I know you've been involved with foreign language immersion programs for young students. There's a contract that you've won with the National Security Agency, and some other DoD contracts. What are you doing to advance foreign language immersion programs around the United States and in this community?
Well, as you have mentioned, I was fortunate to get a grant that is under the Security Language Initiative of the United States. And it started in 2007. And it was a President George W. Bush initiative. He felt at the time, after the Iraq War, our citizens and our students are not fluent in what he called critical world languages. So he then established this program and offered in the summer 11 languages. And Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Dari, Urdu, Swahili. The other 5 languages is from the BRICS country, our competitors. BRICS is B as Brazil, Portuguese. R is in Russia, Russian. I is in India, Hindi. C is in China, Mandarin Chinese. BRICS, the last is S, South Africa. They speak English. So they add Korean. So those are the 11 languages. What they hope is that the community or the students or the school, that when they get the grant, they would then incorporate one of those critical languages into their curriculum.
So you think that, or I guess the goal of the program is to generate a new generation of Americans who are fluent in these critical languages, and then that will somehow advance the interests of the United States?
Yes.
How so?
Well, because the world has become global. And as we see that we have involved in the Middle East, in Asia, in South America, in every part of America. And example is China. Over 300 million Chinese are speaking English. How many of us...
That's the same population of the United States.
Yes. How many of us learn Chinese? Their children grow up to have an understanding of our language, our culture, our way.
How will that...
Our children. Because when you learn language, you learn also the culture. You see, and all the exchanges. President Obama, about in 2008, already stated, we're going to have 100,000 students go to college in China. And he accomplished that in 2015 through some sort of private-public initiative. And then last November, you make a statement, by the year 2020, we're going to have 1 million students in our school system in America learn Mandarin Chinese.
Wow. So, just before we get it back to you, I want to just talk. So you said 300 million Chinese citizens now speak English. Does that give China a competitive edge in the international economy over Americans who don't speak Mandarin?
No question about that. Because their people think global. Their elementary school, all the elementary students learn English.
Mm-hmm.
So China, they have 4 or 5 times the population of the United States. Just by the economy of scale,
Mm-hmm.
their economy is going to surpass us sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
So it is to our advantage if our students, next generation, are fluent, say in Chinese, then we will become more competitive. The jobs will be available, will require in the future the understanding of global other countries that we are competing or doing business with.
So what are you doing to ensure that the next generation of Americans speak Mandarin?
Well, I have involved and volunteered in this public school. After school program offering Chinese in at least 5 to 7 different elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the parents will pay for it.
Hmm.
But I've been talking with the Montgomery County public schools
Mm-hmm.
system for the last 3-4 years and share with them all I need is one FTE position at the administrative level. I could then develop 3 after-school Chinese program in the eastern part of Montgomery County elementary school for the whole year.
Interesting. So, and why in the eastern part of Montgomery County?
Well, right now there are data from North Carolina,
Yeah.
Utah, and Minnesota that students learn and fluent in critical world languages.
Mm-hmm.
I say critical world languages.
Mm-hmm.
They do well in all the subjects matter than their peers who do not, take those critical languages classes. So we have a problem about low student achievement in the eastern part of Montgomery County. So in order to encourage the school system and interest to say, why not consider it? Let me do it, show it to you, and you can evaluate to see whether the students, especially minority students, Hispanic and African American students,
Mm-hmm.
learn Chinese, do well in other subject matter, and compare with their peers who do not.
So for our listeners, who may not be too familiar with the geography and demography of Montgomery County, Maryland, the eastern portion of Montgomery County tends to be less wealthy. The western and southern portion of Montgomery County tend to be a little bit wealthier and more Caucasian in terms of demographic profile. East County tends to be more minority demographics and lower economic status. So whereas one of the first foreign language Mandarin immersion programs in Montgomery County was started by Dr. Cheung in Potomac Elementary School on the western part of Montgomery County, he is now talking about bringing foreign language immersion programs with Mandarin language to a part of the county that is less financially well off.
Yes, I think you just explained better than I do. You have a good understanding.
So, Dr. Cheung, have there been any results or have there been any students who have grown up and are using or have benefited from their foreign language immersion?
Well, I think so, but because we do not have a hard evidence.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the Star Talk programs, the one that I got funded in the summer,
Mm-hmm.
after 3 weeks, many of the students, I select students who are non-heritage students.
Meaning students who are not of
Chinese.
Okay,
not
Chinese descent.
And then also another criteria is low socioeconomic groups.
Uh-huh.
So after 3 weeks, we're using the standards. The American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages, they call the World Readiness Standards. And the guideline and principles designed to teach American students on foreign languages. Because most of the students learning Chinese today and other foreign languages are often taught the same way that, say, Chinese like taught into China. But these standards and guidelines and principles are designed for our students in America.
So you've mentioned two separate types of programs so far. You mentioned after-school programs that parents would pay for out of pocket that potentially could be subsidized by the NSA grant. But then you also mentioned, or at least I mentioned on the program, that there is such a thing as foreign language immersion programs within the elementary school day. So can you please elaborate upon the differences between the after-school private program and the during-school public program?
Okay. I also volunteer in called the Huayan Chinese Academy. This is an after-school program. They provide the teaching of Chinese language and culture 5 days a week after school. And most of the students are heritage students because their parents want them to maintain their languages. And the parents pay for it. I'm talking about the other after school to get the Montgomery County Public School to pay for it so that the students will benefit without having the cost of the program.
And now so how does the program work for non-heritage students or heritage students who happen to go, for instance, to Potomac Elementary School?
Well, it's a long waiting list. There are only 2 schools for the programs. So they'll wait for a long, long time. Couldn't get it.
But if they get off the waiting list, do they learn science in Mandarin?
Sure. They also learn all the other subjects like other students. So we try to encourage because, there is some data show that learning Chinese, you stimulate both sides of the brain.
Right.
So that helps in terms of learning. And secondly, students who learn Chinese that we find over the summer program, that they say they learn something their parents don't know.
Yeah.
But they're also teaching their parents. This gives them incentive to learn, to expand their learning. And they're very proud of what they do, and they did well.
Do they retain it over time?
No. That is the reason I'm very concerned about that. They learn it easily in the 3 summer, and they will speak some basic Chinese. If we do not continue, they're going to lose it. So that's the reason I will try to work with the Montgomery County Public School to say, please continue, and please start it in area that I can demonstrate would help. In fact, I hope eventually many of the schools, especially elementary school, will offer the program. Example, Delaware 2 years ago, their school system, which is smaller, the whole state is smaller than Montgomery County Public School.
Yeah.
They have 6 immersion schools, Chinese. And Utah, they all have many Chinese immersion schools.
Does it
The
have
last 2-3 years, there are over 35 states in the United States that exports at least over $1 billion of products to China. And Maryland's not one of them. And you look at them, many of them have very well organized Chinese programs. So therefore, by exporting to China, we create jobs, we create economy. So therefore, Maryland is supposed to be one of the best public education state in the United States. And we have not taken the lead.
Right.
And Potomac Elementary School in Montgomery County is the first Chinese language immersion in the whole United States. And right now, everyone is catching up with us and leaving behind. For example, I can share with you, even Ohio, there is a billionaire Chinese businessman will invest a lot of money in Ohio to open a glass plant, manufacturing plant in Ohio. So in order to attract them, you have to offer them something. Learning Chinese, speaking Chinese is one of the components to attract them.
So he's manufacturing glass, and he's attracting Americans to be employees of his glass plant
He's
by
investing
saying
Chinese money in the United States.
So he says, we'll give you jobs if you manufacture glass at my manufacturing plant, and in return, not only will we pay you, but we'll also teach you how to speak Mandarin.
No, he didn't say that. But he's saying that America is a country free, I guess, compared with China.
Yeah.
So he's making his billions. He did not want to put all the eggs in one basket.
Right.
So he wanted to invest. And he happened to know someone in Ohio, or Ohio State showed him a bill of goods. And it was in the old General Motors factory that he's going to establish the plant over there. By doing that, the worker has to be the American workers.
Yeah.
The money comes from him. But he may have some Chinese come over to work in the plant too. So therefore, will become a global business.
So basically, the local people who live in Ohio, the local Americans who live in Ohio, if they speak Chinese, they will be promoted more quickly within the company so they can work with the Chinese employees who are brought over.
No question about that. Same thing. If our students, college students, if they are fluent in Chinese, I guarantee they find better jobs in China. Give you an example. When I was with the University of Maryland, Confucius Institute, about that was 6-7 years ago, we put 2 teachers in Paint Branch Elementary School, Prince George County Public School, next to the University of Maryland, to teach Chinese there. Well, 2 years ago, the president of the University of Maryland said the 3rd graders in the elementary school, mostly minority and Hispanic, speak better Chinese than he does. And they do well in all the subject matter than the peers. They do not do it.
So I want to...
But then let me share with you. The principal, Dr. J. Caston, who worked with us, was offered a job to go to China. Over $200,000 a year. 3 years contract for international school. A job for his wife. International school for his 2 or 3 children. He has a house, a car, and a chauffeur for 3 years contract. He said, I could never make that much money if I stay in in Maryland. So you can look at the opportunities that they have.
So you've drawn a strong correlation between education and economic development. We're nearing the end of the podcast, and I want to talk a little bit more about you and your motivations. So you ran in 1990, in the early 1990s for Montgomery County Board of Education, and you subsequently became president of the Board of Education. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you've done, or why you ran for office, why after retiring you continued to advance the public interest, and what has continually motivated you over all these decades?
Well, I have to say and admit, in 1990, I was a really naive person in politics. But I did recognize the change of demographic. There was a slowly increase of Asian American in Montgomery County at the time, but it's not as many as today. And I have been lobbying, and I found that there's not enough Asian American teachers, administrative people in the school system. So I've been lobbying the school board members, the council members, to increase more Asian American. And there was not a single Asian American in the supervisory level. So I've been lobbying Finally, a couple of board members and council members told me that, why don't you run for the board education? By running for the board education doesn't mean you're going to win it, but you can surface your issue to the larger community. Initially, I refused 2-3 times, and finally they gave me the ultimatum: if you do not run, don't come to us for support. So that's the reason forced me to do that. So no one expect me to win, okay? And I ran. I learned how to run as a candidate, and I was a fast learner. My issues at the time was to introduce computer into the school system. That is quite attractive. Second, I was to increase more math and science. Third, I tried to promote the concept of global education, which to me is the integration, the best practices of education in the East with the best educational practices of the West. Since I'm not a trained professional educator, I want to put educator from both sides.
What are you a trained professional as?
In clinical pharmacology.
So this whole time you've been developing a passion in education, a political career in education, really a calling in expanding foreign language immersion education. And you're a clinical pharmacologist. You deal with drugs and science, and that's how you built your career. So why take away from your career where you were educated, where you were building a life, providing for your family? Why take time away from that in order to move the public interest ahead with education?
Well, I was one of the pioneers in clinical pharmacology. So I became a fellow in American College of Clinical Pharmacology. But we all started being a specialist, a micro thinkers. We only specialize in one area. Slowly, I began to think that we need to be broaden our thinking. We can learn from everyone. So I became changed into a macro person and forsaken my clinical pharmacology. So I become a master or none. But you learn, you enrich, you found how much you don't know. You continue learning. I think that is important. My career is really thinking about, not about myself, it's how to get things done. I think of myself as a change agent. Is anything we can do better in the world? A little bit. So I was accepted as one of the 5 scholars. They call administrative scholars, a program before the MacArthur Foundation Fellows. So that's how I left the University of Southern California to come over to D.C., work with the White House Fellows and Congressional Fellows to learn about creative thinking, innovative ideas. A member of the Democratic Central Committee. I never expected to win, but I understand that learning from the political system, I have volunteers in majority of the precincts within the Montgomery County. I ran at large. So I built up a volunteer system in those precincts, have higher voters turnout.
So I think we need to wrap up now. So you heard it straight from Dr. Cheung. Dr. Cheung presents himself as a lifelong student who has long sought to improve the world little by little to the best of his ability. I think public service for Dr. Cheung means enjoying doing the work, going out there, learning, gaining something from it. This is a common thread that we have in many of our interviewees, is that public service isn't only about others, but it is rewarding intrinsically for each of the individuals who seeks to advance the public interest. So I thank you for joining us in episode 23 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the public interest. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.